do another diagram. All right, so the addition is how many are going to be made from the matrix, and this varies depending on the technique, silk screening or what have you. What it is a certain number to make sure it's limited, because if you keep going, the matrix is going to degrade, if that makes sense. So you want to make sure the colors and the shapes and all that stuff, the line quality is accurate, so you limit the number of addition. And again, that varies depending on the technique, because like a lithograph is not going to degrade as fast as, say, a wood block, because it's a stone, and then wood might degrade faster. Registration is aligning the paper in the same place on the press so that the colors will line up. So say you want to get a blue, you have a blue layer, and then you want to get some greens, you got to line up the yellow just so. You might want some actual yellow, and then you might want some green, so you're going to line that up so that the two of them are going to work over the blue areas and the not blue areas. Key block, this is the first edition, or sorry, the first artist proof is another term for this. You want to make sure that it's the accurate color and everything's looking right before you move on and make the addition. So relief printmaking, that's again like a shoe print, basically a wood cut or a lino cut. And this is an example of a wood block hand scroll. A wood block's a little different than a wood cut. It's the same way of working on the matrix, but a block is just kind of pressed in. Maybe a printing press might not have been used. It's just kind of hand pressed in there. And remember, if you think back to paper, how China invented paper and how it was transmitted, it is transmitted through Buddhism and the teachings, because they would print these sutras on scrolls, both an image as a diagram, and so some people who are not literate could understand it, and then the writing that we have over here, some of the script over here. So that is how paper traveled and became more international. Okay, this is a lino cut. If you notice, and that wood cut is not a good example, I'll try to show you a better slide in a moment. So the lino cut, you can cut, it's just basically kind of a layered, thick, if you know what a linoleum floor piece is like, but it's also kind of like a sort of like an eraser kind of quality. So you can carve it any direction. There's no grain. So you can get all these little different shapes going this way, that way. With a wood block, you'd cut it in one direction mostly, because it's going to have a grain. So relief printmaking, we covered this. Wood engraving uses the end of a block of wood. You know, when you look at the very end of a board, it's not the grain, it's a very fine, dense part of the wood, and it's the end grain. You can go in any direction, true, but it's very hard to carve this. But you can get these wonderful textures if you see this at the end of the block of wood. So not very common, it does happen, but as you can see, there is sort of a direction with this piece. Okay, intaglio methods, it means to cut. And there's a really good engraving and dry point and so on. It kind of shows you how all these different things are done. Etching, this right here is acid. It's kind of hard to tell that it's soaked in a liquid, so that you leave it in an acid bath. You put it in a tub full of acid, and it starts to cut into the it cuts into the metal. Does that make sense? Same thing over here with aquatint. Other types of intaglio do the same thing because it's bathed in an acid. So the artist is making depressions, and those depressions are where the ink is, if that makes sense. And then the top layer is wiped clean, and then you have damp paper because it pulls that ink out a little bit more. Intaglio, again, we'll go back over that in your other PowerPoint. There's a really nice Durer piece here of an etching, a lot of detail. You can kind of see that. More detail than can be achieved with a wood block. Does that make sense? Yes and no, but basically. Like our dollar bills, you can look at them. Those are etchings. This is a looser dry point from Louis Bourgeois, much later. This is very recent, 95. And it's very loose, and she left a lot of the scratches in, which is a much more contemporary practice. Um, a lot of printmakers would be horrified at that. But you can see some of the line quality here with the dry point. Mezzotint is just going to have tonal areas, okay? So when we look at this, and also aquatint it's a variation of the etching process, and it also has tonal areas. So when we look at these, I'm going to let you read over these on your own. When you get into Goya, and this is 1799, he's got this whole area here with the aquatint. Oh, there's that typo. Sorry, I didn't find it earlier. He's got this nice sort of textured background here. He's got big patches of sort of flat color, and that's what he wants. So that's why he used aquatint. Okay. Another case of aquatint. Now she mixed this up, and you can mix a fair amount of these processes as a printmaker might want to do. Basically, the paper just needs to be dry or whatever, or wet, depending on the application of the ink, and you can change things up. So I'm going to guess, the book doesn't tell us, and I'm not an expert on prints, but I would say that the dry point would be these lines that you're seeing here, this sort of drawn lines, and that the aquatint is going to be these broader, flatter areas with color. This is an imitation of Japanese woodblock printing, which is confusing, but it's an aquatint. Okay, more information on these guys. Photogravure. This is an interesting technique that uses photographs. We have a nice example in the book, 8.14, Counting by Lorna Simpson. And this has 3 different images here, and then she's having some text as well. I don't know if those are photos. I imagine that they are. But it's a very interesting and contemplative piece to do with a bit of history, slavery, and present-day African-American experience. Really nice piece. I can't explain that process very well, but it's basically an etching of a photo onto paper. Mezzotint is going to also give you some tonal areas. Photogravure is using a photographic image. And lithography is a planographic process. I know it doesn't mean anything to you, but it's it's a flat surface, and I think I mentioned that in the first audio PowerPoint. You can barely tell when you touch it. Okay, so Singing Their Songs, 8.16. This has got some really great color, and you can kind of see how, and this one's a lithograph. Sorry, I didn't give that information right there. It's in the book. But you can see how the registration process would work, where this brown tone needs to line up with where it's going to go. There's black and there's brown. There's even a smidge right there. And then all these different colors. This is on one surface. So each one of those colors is a different journey through the press. Okay, so all the things have to line up. So make sure that this white is captured correctly, and that brown and darker blacks and the gray and everything else. So each color goes through a different pass, and you got to make sure that all the marks line up. Okay, a little more on this, and you guys can read that over. Silk screening, lastly. This is Ruche. It looks like Ruche, but it's Ruche, or Rusha. But he's an amazing artist, still alive today. And he does a silk screening process, and you're going to read a little bit more about how he obtains this transition right here in the book. Nicole Eisenman, monoprint. That's a different style. Sorry. Monoprint. That is a singular print. It's kind of like a painting, but it's pressed into the paper. So you basically do a painting. You do all the work of a painting, then you press it in the paper, and then you get a reverse image. They can be really amazing, and some interesting things happen, but monoprint is kind of going against the sense of printmaking because it's just one. There's no addition. All right, that's it.